Home is where your honeybee. That's the project we're going to work on today. If you purchased your surface from me or from Palette and Sawdust, this is what your surface will look like. It comes with the pattern already etched on. If you didn't, if you're just adjusting it to fit a surface in your stash, then you will need to apply the pattern when we get done with this background. But the first thing we're going to do to our piece is we are going to paint it with 1 coat of bleach sand. So you don't have to water it down. Use as big a brush as you have so you can get this done quickly. And with the etching on there, it doesn't matter if you go over it because you still see it behind there. That's one of the things I love about having the pattern etched on already. So you're just going to add a coat of bleach sand all over the background. This is going to be the base that we're going to work on as we add some colors to the background. So as you can see, it's not opaque, it's streaky. You can still see some of the brown background through it, and that's fine. What we want to do is let this dry, and then we'll work on getting those soft colors in the background. Alright, one of the first things I did is sand it lightly so it'll be a smooth painting surface. And now I'm going to get out a puddle of each of these 4 colors: Irish Moss, Golden Straw, Purple Cow, and Moody Blue. And I want to thin them down to a medium wash. So I'll give you a little look at what I'm going to do. And just going to add some water and make this a wash. It's a little bit thicker than your wash that you would make for a tint or anything. But I want to have these thinned down before I start on my piece. Okay. Blue, let's get some purple thinned down. And our green. Now if you don't have these colors, you can always substitute them for colors that you do have. Okay, so I've got those thinned down into puddles. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a piece of white tissue paper, and I've torn it into 4 pieces, and what I've done is I've crumpled it up into a ball so it gets nice and wrinkly, and then I uncrumple it and just kind of fold it onto itself. And what I'm going to do is I decided I wanted to have green through this area, so I'm going to pick up the Irish Moss on this crumpled piece of tissue paper, and I'm just going to start tapping it on into this area. And see how nice and soft that is? And you do want to get in wherever there might be little peekaboo spots around the gnome, just to get some color in there. Okay, so I think that's enough of that. Maybe a little bit more right here. But see how nice and soft that is? So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this tissue and I'm going to fold it on itself so I have a clean spot. And I think I want to put purple down in this area. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of that thinned down Purple Cow, and I'm just going to start pouncing this on. Now I could have added more water, I think, to this, but it'll probably be okay. So I'm just adding some more color and kind of blending it into the green. Let's get over here a little bit more on this side. They're not like squares or rectangles. You're just going to put color wherever you just really feel like you want a pop of this color. And if you don't want to put purple there, put a different color there. Now I am going to pick up a little water on that tissue just so I can blend that little area where the green meets the purple a little bit better. And I might even pick up a little bit of the green and work it back into that area. Okay, so this piece of tissue is done. So I'm going to grab another little piece that I've crumpled, and now I'm going to fold it onto itself. And I am going to, I think I want to do some Moody Blue up in this sky area. So pounce it a little bit. And you don't have to go onto the gnome, but if you do, it's no big deal. Moody Blue is one of my favorite colors, so when you find it in the store, buy it. Don't pass it by. And so again, I want to blend these colors a little bit. I'm going to pick up a little green and kind of blend it into that blue. Even though it's going to be kind of hidden by the gnome, I still want to do that. Alright, now fold this tissue onto itself again so you get a clean spot, and we are going to add some yellow. So just pounce some yellow in there, like it's the sky. Now I want to blend this area a little bit more. So I'm going to come back with the purple cow and kind of work it in to the yellow a little bit. Now you could rub it so it softens it. And maybe I want to put a little bit of yellow down here in this corner. So you just kind of play with your colors so you get it in there. You don't have to worry about getting it on him because you're going to base coat him anyway. So wherever, just kind of scrub it on to blend a little bit. And let's see. I'm going to blend this purple a little bit more into the green. Alright, cool. There we go. We've got our background done. So you can throw your tissue paper away. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit more interest to the background with this Crackle Stamp. You can find these at CD Wood, but I just want to add a little bit of more interest with crackles. So what I did is I'm going to put out a puddle of burnt umber. And what I'm going to do is kind of spread it across my palette like this. I have way too much burnt umber, by the way. But I'm just going to make a rectangle the size that this stamp will fit on. Okay. Then I'm going to do is put my stamp down and just press it into that rectangle of paint. Now you probably want to stamp it off on your palette a little bit to get a lot of the paint off. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to randomly add some crackling. And it doesn't have to be complete. It can be just one side whatever. Just add a little bit of crackling on your piece. And this just adds interest to that background a little bit. And then you can just wash your brush, your stamp off with water. Okay, I want to add even more interest to the background. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get out my stencil brush. I'm going to get a piece of punchinello, or if you have a stencil that is just circles, what I want to do is I want to stencil random clusters of dots. You'll hear that a lot from me if you watch my videos, on the background. And they can go over the Crackle stamp that you did. That's all right. But you just want to go around and add some random clusters of dots around. So what I like to do is add interest to my backgrounds, just to so they're just not there and sitting there all blah. You've got all this going on in the design, but your background looks kind of blah. So I always like to do this kind of stuff to the backgrounds just to give them interest, but they just kind of complement the design. They don't take away from it so much. At least I hope they don't. So just all right. There we go. I think that's good. So you can wash out your stencil brush and set your punchinello aside. And we are going to move on to floating some shading around the outside edge. And I'm going to do that with burnt umber because I want to age it a little bit. So I'm going to side load float some burnt umber all the way around the edge of this. And I can pick up burnt umber from where I did my Crackle stamp because I have plenty. So I'm just going to go around this edge. Across the bottom. I'm going to walk it out in the corners a little bit, so round those corners out. It's a nice soft float, not a heavy float of burnt umber. You want to blend it out really well so that you don't get a really harsh burnt umber float. All right, so there, I've softened those edges and aged them a little bit. I'm also going to float burnt umber around the gnome for sure, and I could tuck it in a couple places around the flowers and leaves. So I'm going on the background around the gnome. So with this soft float of burnt umber. Oops, I followed his antenna instead of his hat. And I loaded the wrong side of my brush. I'm just gonna do a nice soft little float all the way around the gnome. And now it's completely up to you how much more shading you want to do. You can go all the way around the design, or you can just touch it in here and there. So I'm just going to touch in on these ends, and I might do a little bit here, just so these flowers kind of pop off those backgrounds. Let's see. I'm going to go here. Oops, went through my leaf. That's all right though, because we haven't painted it yet. Okay, I think that's going to do it for me. So I just did a little bit underneath the flower design area, but all the way around the... No, the next thing we're going to do is we have warm white on our palette, so let's go ahead and base in his wings with warm white. Alright, one coat should do, as long as you didn't add a lot of water to your brush. Let's go ahead and base in his hat with the golden straw that we have on our palette. Not the watered down stuff, but the full-on paint. And don't have to add water. Go ahead and base this flower in with golden straw also. You can go right over the center and the little dots. And as long as we can still get in our warm white, let's go ahead and base in these daisy-like flowers. If you have a small flat, that would work. This is a number 6. I'm going to say it will work. We'll see. So I'm just going to base in those daisy-like flowers, not the centers, with warm white. And I'm going to try to do a better job than that. All right, I bet you're really glad I didn't put more of those flowers on. I know I am really glad I didn't put more of those flowers on. So let's get some coral shell and we'll base in his face. So his face and his nose are based in with coral shell. Easy peasy. Let's base in the larger leaves with forest green. So I'm probably going to use a round brush to base in those larger leaves. Right, the smaller leaves you want to base in with Irish moss, and I'll go down to a liner brush for that. Let's see if I can find a good liner brush. There we go. And you should still have that on your palette. You can break into it. And so these are just little leaves with Irish moss. We want to paint his beard in with slate gray. Let's go ahead and paint his hat brim and every other stripe on his hat with graphite. So this brown flower right here, let's go ahead and paint it with Moody Blue. Of course, you could paint it any color you want. And these two round swirly flowers we're going to base in with dragon fruit. All right. I think we have everything based in except for the centers on our flowers. So let's get to work on the gnome. Now I'm going to float some shading on his wings with Moody Blue. I'm going to start out floating it next to his body and his hat. So just a nice soft float of Moody Blue at the base of his wings. We're going to go around his hat brim where it's on this top wing too. Okay. I also want to shade the bottom edge of each wing. So I'm just going to float along the bottom edge. And here I'm going to float where there's flowers or leaves on top of the wing, because we want to set the flowers and leaves in front. All right, let's go ahead and float the top edge with some Moody Blue also. So everything gets floated except the tip of the flower, of the wing. Flower, and flowers on the brain. So we're just going to go across the top of each wing with a soft float of Moody Blue. Now I want to reinforce the tips of those wings, so I'm going to float a highlight on the tip of them with warm white, which is the color they're based in. I just want to brighten up those tips. This one is only going to have just a hair of the tip get brightened up, because there's only a little bit of it showing. Okay. Now with a liner brush and thinned Moody Blue, we're going to add that little bit of webbing design to it. So you want to thin it down. You want it to be a nice thin line. So I'm going to start, I will start in the middle of each wing, and then I work out or in from there. Going out, and then I'm going to work my way in. And notice I'm curving this line. It's following the shape of the wing. So let's work in, again curving that line, and then I work out towards the edge, kind of following the shape of the tip of the wing. So again, I'm going to go through the center, I'm going to work in and out. And then in the same way, I'm going to do the horizontal lines. So I'm going to start in the center, go across, and again, it's curved to follow the shape of that wing. And then I'm going to come another one above and another one below. So through the center, above, and below. Need a little bit more Moody Blue. So turning it around through the center, and then I'm going to go below it and above it. Center, below, and above. All right, cool, cute little wings. We are going to dry brush some highlighting on his face and on the yellow stripes on his hat. So you want to get out a brush that you like to dry brush with. I like to use a Langnickel short round sable brush, and we are going to dry brush that highlighting with warm white. So as you can see, I dry brush quite a bit. I think that's from yesterday. So I'm going to dry brush in his nose with warm white, and I'm also going to go on the sides of his faces. If it gets off into his beard, that's perfectly fine. So I did inside his nose and on his cheeks. And now I want to dry brush on the yellow stripes. So I'm just going to go horizontally across on the yellow stripes. Through the centers of them. And then just wipe your brush out. Pick up a little bit of your Moody Blue and pick up a little bit of warm white to lighten it up a little bit. You want a little bit lighter value of that Moody Blue. I'm going to dry brush highlighting across the hat brim, and then I'm going to dry brush in each dark stripe. I'm going to need some honey brown. I'm going to float shading on each side of the yellow stripes with honey brown. And you want to walk that in towards the center, widen it up a little bit. every yellow stripe is going to get shaded on both sides with honey brown. And an extra little color there. So I'm going to go back and shade the other sides now. It's looking good. I think I need to deepen the shading on this one a little bit. We also want to float this shading on the bottom yellow stripe above the hat brim. So I want to go all the way across above the hat brim. Now with lamp black, I'm going to do the same thing on the dark stripes and the hat brim. I'm going to float the outside edges with lamp black. So each edge of the hat brim, and each side of the dark stripes. Okay, slowly but surely. Basically the tip gets shaded all the way around because it's all black. Kind of bounce around a little bit here. Let's see, one more spot right here. Now I'm going to give him his little antenna, and I'm going to do that with warm white. In down some warm white a little bit, and a liner brush, and you just want to line his little antenna. When you get to the end, you just want to fill in that little circle with warm white. And let me just fill in that little circle at the end. Cute, cute, cute. I also want to take just a touch of Moody Blue on my liner brush. Just a teeny tiny touch of Moody Blue. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull a little bit of shading at the base of each of those antennae. So with Moody Blue. And then I want to take a float of Moody Blue, and I'm going to float the top edge of that hat brim just to brighten it up a little bit. Not too much. Now I'm looking at these wings, and I think I want to take my liner brush and some warm white and kind of highlight that webbing just in the outside edge a little bit. Not completely, but just a little bit. It just was bugging me a little bit. So I'm just going to line a little warm white highlight on that webbing. And that stays mostly in the end of the wings. Okay. Now, we're going to work on his little face. We need dried clay. Now, if you don't have dried clay, you can always use shading flesh. You could even get away with using burnt sienna. But what I want to do is I want to float some shading on his face with dried clay. And I'm going to float under the hat brim. I'm going to mop that a little bit. I also want to go in the bottom of his nose. So that's like a C stroke. In the bottom of his nose. Got a little hair there, which completely wiped out my shading right there. Then I want this to dry a little bit, because I'm going to come on his cheeks and around the top of his nose. So down his cheeks and around the top of his nose. And on that other cheek again. Now I want to take some warm white, and I'm going to float a highlight in the top of his nose, just to make his nose stand out a little bit more. Doesn't that look better? So we want to dry that a little bit, because we want to come back with dragon fruit and float a little color on his cheeks and in the bottom of his nose. So a side load float of dragon fruit. I'm going to go on his cheeks a little bit just to rosy them up. I'm going to go in the bottom of his nose, right on top of that shading you did. And then on his other cheek. So there, he looks a little friendlier, a little rosier. Now, we had burnt umber out earlier. Maybe you can still get into that. But I want to deepen some of the shading on the yellow part of the hat. So it doesn't need to be a really heavy float of burnt umber, nice and soft. I'm just going to darken that side edge a little bit. In fact, we could go all the way down. The only thing you need to avoid is that antenna. But you can go right and float over the dark stripes. So I'm just going to stop when I get to the antenna. Go across the bottom here. And I'm going to go right there where that hat kind of folds over. And then I'm going to go across the top. Okay. Oh yeah, that looks better. All right, let's give him a beard. Now that is painted in with slate gray. So what I want to do is I want to pick up, let's get some burnt umber with a little bit of warm white. We want to make a lighter value of burnt umber. I don't want it to be that brown. And I don't want to pull in another color if I don't have to. So just a little bit of burnt umber and a little bit of warm white to make a lighter value. And we're going to start putting the underwear on his beard. Let's see, can we get a little closer on him? All right, so what I'm going to do, and I always start pulling in the middle, much like I did those the webbing on his wings. So I always start pulling the hair down the center. And so I'm just going to start getting used to pulling some beard whiskers. And you notice again, I'm following this shape. And everything's not coming from this middle point. Okay. So just pull. The first layer of whiskers on with that burnt umber warm white mix. And basically this is just to give it another color dimension in there, and also to give you a chance to lay down the direction. Now if you wanted to make your gnome beard be curly, you could do that too. But I wanted to keep him basically straight. Just simple. Alright, so I want to let that dry a little bit because I don't want to make mush. I'm going to come back in a little bit and line the warm white highlight on, line the lighter whiskers. So let's work on these leaves a little bit. What we want to do is we want to dry brush some highlighting on those bigger leaves with Irish moss. So I'm just going to go on each large leaf, just scrub some Irish moss into the center area of each leaf. Wherever you can get your little dry brush in, that's great. And now what I want to do is I want to float a highlight on each of those leaves with Irish moss. So side lobe float of Irish moss, and I'm going to decide what the top of each leaf is. And I'm going to float the top edge and the center vein line. So as you go around painting highlights on these leaves, you get to decide which leaf, what's the top of that leaf, because it's going to change. So this one, and this one's going to be on this side. Alright, so I've highlighted the top edge and the center vein line on each of those large leaves. So I'm going to take the little leaves and I'm just going to float a touch of shading in the base of each of those little leaves. So wherever there's a little leaf, you just want to float a little bit of forest green at what's the base of that leaf. It's kind of like just touching your flat brush in there and spreading a little bit of forest green paint around. think we can go back to his beard now. And with our liner brush and warm white, we're going to start stroking on the lighter whiskers. Okay, so with your liner brush and warm white, what I want you to do is kind of flatten your brush out so it kind of has a square tip. And starting from the bottom up, again in the center, you just want to stroke and add some thicker whiskers. And just tap some around those leaves. But you just want it to be a little thicker, a little more body to them. So you just go around and continue adding whiskers around the beard. And you should still be able to see a little bit of that brown back there and a little bit of the gray. It's a cute little beard. So I'm going to work on the other side now. You just want to load that brush with that little bit of thicker liner consistency paint and pull from the bottom up towards his face. Follow the shape of the beard. And we'll just give him a nice looking set of facial hair. Full bodied, and he uses great shampoo, I think, or beard wash, whatever you guys use. I don't know. My husband just has a mustache. All right, that looks pretty good. Now, if you wanted to, you could go back and line another layer, but I think that's enough. So we're going to let that dry, and then we'll come back and do some shading on it. So I now want to float some shading on the larger leaves. So I'm going to get some Hauser dark green. So I'm going to float Hauser dark green the opposite side of where I floated the highlight of Irish moss. So it's also going to go wherever the leaf is behind something. So on this one, it's behind the petals on this flower. So I'm going to do that. And I'm going to go here. Tuck a little there. And it's underneath this flower. So I've done Hauser dark green. I'm also going to come back and float that center vein line opposite of where I highlighted it. This guy's going to get floated next to the blue and purple flowers. And this one's going to get floated next to the blue flower. We'll come back and do the center vein line when those floats are dry. Here against the pink flower. Here against the pink and yellow flower. Let's do this one next to the white flower. Tuck a little bit up in there. And this one is next to the white flower also. let's see, one more next to the pink and the white flower. So I do need to go back and do the bottom edge of each of these leaves. This one I'm going to go just on the center vein line. And this one is going to get on the center vein line. And let's do the bottom edge of this one. And then also the center vein line. Right. Bottom edge of this guy, center vein line. Bottom edge of this guy, and the center vein line. This one, you can just do this center vein line. And bottom edge, center vein line, bottom edge, and center vein line. Okay, now let's see. We're going to work on these pink flowers in the background. So what we're going to do is we are going to take a small round brush. Let me see if I can find one here. This is a 4. So I'm using a 4 round brush. I'm going to pick up some dragon fruit, which is the color this was based in, and then I'm going to pick up some warm white and just kind of brush mix it on my palette. I'm not mixing it completely together, just there's going to be tints of light and dark. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to stroke this color across the top and kind of through the center. Okay. I'm following that spiral shape, but not exactly. So I want to go across the top and just start following the spiral down into the center, and you can pull it a little bit more on that side. Right. So we're going to want to pick up some dragon fruit and deep burgundy and stroke in the bottom edge. So just a little bit of deep burgundy out on your palette, and you want to do the same thing as you did with the warm white. You're going to load your brush with dragon fruit and pick up a little deep burgundy and kind of brush mix it a little bit. And you're going to stroke in the bottom of this flower. Okay. More deep burgundy than dragon fruit. All right. Just wipe your brush out and pick up straight warm white on that dirty brush. And just tap it to blend it. And you're going to stroke on the lightest. It could get a little lighter, but you want to kind of stroke into the darker here too. You don't want to keep it just in the top. You want to take it down into the darker area also. So I'm going to stroke a little bit here. And then I'm also going to pull this down into the bottom area. Wipe your brush out again, because we can get even lighter here. Pull some more warm white out. And this is going to be just a little bit of warm white. I think my bottoms of my flowers need to be a little bit darker, so I'm just going to come in with some straight deep burgundy and pull some dark back in there, so along the bottom. So this is something you could play with a lot. Just to get a look you like. Let's work on our white flowers. So I'm going to float a highlight at the tips of each petal with warm white, just to reinforce the tips of those petals. So just go around this whole flower and float warm white just to reinforce the tips. And this helps you also if you want to clean them up a little bit. If they got a little wonky, you can straighten them up. Alright, so I've done warm white highlighting at the tips of each of those petals on the white flowers. So now I'm going to float some shading around the centers, and I want to do that with warm sunset, or you could use burnt orange or spiced pumpkin. And I'm just going to float a little bit of this orange at the base of each one of those white petals. Just wanted to bring another nice color in. Let's go to this piece, this flower, the yellow one, and what I want to do is I want to dry brush some highlighting on it, and we might as well dry brush on our blue flower too with warm white. So I'm going to dry brush on this flower here with warm white. Doesn't matter if you get in the center. And I'm going to dry brush around here with warm white. I'm also going to float a highlight across this top edge of the yellow flower with warm white. And then I want to pick up a little moody blue with my warm white, make a lighter value of that moody blue, and I'm going to float a highlight across the top of this flower with that warm white moody blue mix. So we need to go back to his beard, and what we're going to do is we're going to float a little bit of shading on his beard next to the flowers here, wherever something touches on top of it. In fact, we can even just come down the sides with burnt umber. I'm going to go around this leaf, down, get a little more color. come around the top of this yellow flower and around these little leaves. On top of the blue flower. And back up the side here. I also want to take and float burnt umber on his beard next to his hat brim. And I'm going to go under his nose and next to his cheeks. I think what we want to do is we want to tap in the centers of those daisy-like flowers with burnt umber. So just get a brush you like to stipple with and just tap in the centers. I also want to add a little bit more color to these petals. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get out my golden straw and I'm going to add another float of color around the base, at the base of each petal with some golden straw. Because they're just not looking interesting enough to me. And I'm going to walk that color up a little ways. They just look kind of blah. Now I can still see the warm sunset, but I just have a little bit more color in those so they don't look so flat. So see the difference between this flower and this flower? This one just looks a little more interesting. All right. Yes, I like that better. Now I am going to go back to his beard. And with some warm white, I'm going to stroke on lighter whiskers, kind of through the center area mainly. So just hit the center. And it doesn't have to follow the same strokes that you put on the last time. Can go over areas that are brown or gray. I just want to brighten that up a little bit. Our centers on our daisy-like flowers, what we can do is we can come in and with our liner brush, or you can use a stylus, then you have to keep your hands out of it. I'm just going to tap some dots of warm white in the top. And on this one. And then I'm going to pick up some lamp black and tap some dots in the bottom. So warm white in the top and lamp black in the bottom. Now let's go to the yellow flower. Let's bring some orange into that puppy. Let's float the bottom edge with that Western Sunset or whatever orange you happen to use. So I'm just going to float, trying to keep my fingers out of my dots. Some Western Sunset across the bottom of this flower. And where the leaf comes on top of the flower. Alright, so I just had a phone call. And while I was talking to my husband, I went ahead and took my liner brush and some warm white, and I added a few little highlight strokes to the wings, a line to the hat, a stroke on his nose, and just so I just have to keep working. So if you want to get your liner brush and add those little highlight strokes there, that'll brighten them up a little bit. So we're going to be back on this flower, and I think I want to paint the center of that flower with Moody Blue, just because I can. Blue and yellow go good together. So we'll paint the center of that one with Moody Blue. And let's paint the center of the blue one with our orange, because blue and orange go really well together. All right. So we want to let that dry. Girls, we're getting close to done. Let's float a little highlight of warm white across the top of this blue center. And a highlight of golden straw across the top of the orange center. Let's float a deep burgundy shade across the bottom of the orange center. And let's pick up some Moody Blue and just a touch of lamp black to make a deeper blue. And we can float a shade across the bottom of the blue center rather than drag another color in. So you want to get out some fresh lamp black to add the dots around the center of the yellow flower. You can do it with your stylus or the back end of your brush. So with the back end of the brush, I'm going to add the little dots around the center of the yellow flower. Now the trick is, keep your fingers out of them. Let's see. I want to add a rough edging to this piece. So I'm going to take my flat brush, an older one, and some burnt umber, and I'm going to do that little raggedy, scraggly edge around this piece. So all I do is I pick up burnt umber, I side load my flat brush like I was going to do a float, except I haven't added water to it, and then I just come along the edge with the color on the piece and just kind of squiggle it on there so it gets a rough edge. I'm going to do that all the way around the piece, keeping my hands out of those black dots that I just put on. Don't get up into your lettering, stay below that. So now I want to let all of this dry, and then I'm going to come and add the lettering and a few details with a brown Identi-Pen. Okay, as I was drying this, I just noticed that I didn't pull Purple Cow in anywhere, except it's just on the background. So what I'm going to do, just to put that color in a few different areas, is I'm going to do a float of Purple Cow, and I'm going to do that on the bottom of the wings just to give them a little tint of that purple, and that way it'll get tied in. So across the bottom of the wings, just add a little float of Purple Cow. I actually think it makes the wings look great. But you should always try to pull colors in your palette, should be in a couple different places. So it wasn't good that this purple was out here all alone. We are going to get out our brown Identi-Pen. And yes, you can get a brown one. You can find it on Amazon. I'll have them on my website. And you can even find them at Michael's or Hobby Lobby. So what makes this nice is, with this brown Identi-Pen, I am going to line some details onto my flowers. So this flower here, the blue one, that has the little lines, you just want to line those with the brown Identi-Pen. Black would be too harsh, so I just suggest you invest in a brown one. But just add these lines with the brown pen. My nose is itching. I hope that means something good. And then what I want to do too is I just wanted to kind of squiggle around this center on this flower, just to add some more interest to that flower. I want to give the little leaves a center vein line and attach them so they're not out here floating. And I'm going to do that with this brown Identi-Pen. So just add little center vein lines on all those little leaves so they're not just floating in the air. Okay. I also want to outline his little beard around his face. And I'm doing that with squiggly lines so that it looks like the beard is coming out of his face more. Also going to do a squiggly line around the outside edge just to define that beard a little bit more. Can also outline his little nose. Okay. Can outline his wings. Okay. Now I want to outline the petals on the daisy flowers just to make them stand out a little bit more. And it doesn't have to be a perfect outline. A little squiggly wiggly is good. It takes the pressure off of trying to do a perfect line around them. So basically you're going to go around and add details to just about everything with this brown Identi-Pen. Again, on the leaves, squiggly is good. That should make you happy. I'm going to even outline those little leaves. I'm going to outline this blue flower. And some more leaves. I'm going to outline this center on the yellow flower and the yellow flower itself. Now the swirly flowers, you just kind of want to do the spiral kind of haphazardly through them. It doesn't have to match up with what you stroked on there. So it's wiggly, squiggly, hit and miss. So I think that's it for the outlining. And that was all done with the thin side, the small side of the pen. So now I'm going to go down to the lettering that's on here. And using the large side, I'm going to just line on the lettering with my Pigma pen. I mean, my Identa pen. It's not a Pigma pen. This is even easier than stencils, I think. Sorry, another little interruption, but I'm back. I'm just going to finish up my lettering here with the brown Identa pen. If you wanted, you could paint the lettering in with a liner brush and probably burnt umber or lamp black. Okay, when I started editing the video, I decided that the yellow and the blue flower were still a little too plain. So I came back to my painting table and got out my liner brush and a little bit of warm white and just added a few more little details to those flowers. And so what I did is I added a highlight dot to each of the black dots that goes around the center of the yellow flower. And I added the cross hatching in the center of the yellow flower, and then just a couple little comma stroke highlights on the left side of that flower. And then on the blue flower, all I did is take my liner brush and just did a quick little highlight stroke from the outside edge in with warm white, and that just kind of popped that flower up a little bit. It doesn't matter if you think you're done, you can always go back and look at your piece and find a little something that you can add to it that'll make it a little more interesting. Anyway, thanks again.